Good morning, everyone. Aldus Valor here, and this video I meant to do last week. I was going to do this one last week, but I couldn't do it last week because I didn't care to do it. So I'm going to do it today, and to make it up to you, I went and got you something nice. It's a gift certificate, and you can just... Alright, I think your screen might be in the way, so what I need you to do is just take a small hammer and just smash open a hole in your screen, and then I can hand this to you. Alrighty, boys and girls, we are getting into some territory that I've never done before. This is going to be a top 10 list. These are the top 10 reasons why there is no rape culture.
Number 10.
There is a rape culture. It's called Islam.
Number 9.
Last one kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it? Here's the reasons why there is no rape culture. Then number 10 is there is one. Well, I guess we'll just respond to Steve Shives then, I guess. And because this is my second response to Steve Shives, that makes it part of a series, which at this point I like to give the person I'm responding to a sort of informal nickname. So from now on, we will refer to Steve Shives as Crotch Gardener. Let's begin.
Hey, here are 5 stupid things I've noticed about Islamophobia.
Number 1, it's a concept invented by terrorists in Western nations in order to seem like they're being oppressed just long enough until they get numbers in order for them to start doing some terrorism. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I forgot what we're doing here. This is your list. We'll send this back to Mrs. Shives' hand puppet.
It's poorly named. I'm referring to the subject of this video as Islamophobia because that has become the most commonly used term for the unjustified and irrational fear, hatred, and/or vilification of Muslims.
I agree. Calling it Islamophobia likens it to things like homophobia, which I'm pretty sure is one of the cornerstones of Islam, but that notwithstanding, homosexuals have never launched a seemingly endless campaign of terrorism on American soil in the name of fabulousness.
It's also been used to describe the double standards we often use when thinking or talking about Muslims and Islam.
What double standard? Islam is false, and Muslims are retarded for believing it. Christianity is false, and Christians are retarded for believing that. That's one standard.
A better term might be anti-Muslim bigotry, and in fact that is the preferred term of many folks, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. But no matter what you call it, prejudice against Muslims and their religion is pervasive.
Pervasive seems to imply that all of us have some kind of power over Muslims. That's the SJW distinction, isn't it? That power is necessary, right? But, we don't all run 7-Eleven, Shives.
Harmful.
To whom? You never hear of cops shooting down unarmed Muslims in the street, do you? I mean, this would imply to me that either Muslims are not as oppressed as you think, or they're constantly armed.
And very, very real. And that last bit is an important one to remind people of when discussing Islamophobia, because its existence is frequently denied.
I get it. This is one of those, I'm not a racist, but lead-ins, right? Alright, let's bark up this tree.
Islamophobia is easy to see and unfortunately quite commonplace in our culture. It exists across a wide spectrum, from violent hate crimes committed against Muslims.
I'm willing to bet that for every Muslim that you can find that was killed in a violent hate crime, I can find 10 non-Muslim Americans that were murdered by Muslims on American soil.
To the ways in which many of us think and talk about Muslims and their religion.
You mean how they're all a bunch of backwards savages whose hatred is fueled by a lie? a work of fiction.
And yet there are still those who insist with apparent conviction, despite all evidence to the contrary, that Islamophobia doesn't exist.
Maybe that's because the so-called Islamophobes, if they can so be called, call it something else. This is exactly what you fucks have done to the word harassment. But it's worse this time, because now some combination of you or your wife have made up a new definition for a word that terrorists invented.
That it's an invented term referring to a non-existent problem.
That's what it is! And that's a nice chart you got on the screen there behind you, Steve. I'd be curious to run that same survey in Islamic nations just to see how much women are oppressed there.
Some of these folks resort to pedantic deconstructions of the term itself, insisting that Islamophobia means fear of Islam, but I just think Islam is false. I'm not afraid of it.
It is fake, and I'm not afraid of it. But here's the thing, all right? Christians ruin America by voting for conservative leaders. Muslims ruin America by blowing shit up. Don't believe me? Take a flight anywhere. And then take a flight anywhere in 1990.
Others rely on the already trite excuse of Islam isn't a race.
It's not, but to your credit, you haven't called it racism yet.
Right, of course, because stereotyping and mistreating people on the basis of their religion is perfectly fine.
Yes, it is! Look, listen. We don't let retards use scissors. We shouldn't let people who go to church make decisions that affect other people.
Isn't that how that works? But by far the most common form of Islamophobia denial is this next one. It's disguised as legitimate criticism. I have nothing against Muslim people. I am criticizing Islam, the religion, and its ideas. I have to be able to criticize bad ideas, don't I? This is the mantra of many Islamophobes, or perhaps I should call them anti-Muslim bigots.
And this is exactly why neither you nor your wife can say jack or shit to me about using words like Muslim and terrorist interchangeably. Because by that last statement, you and or your wife seem to acknowledge that stereotypes are there for a reason. All right? Not all Catholic priests are child molesters, but there's enough of them that are that certain stereotypes have begun to emerge. Not all Muslims are terrorists, but...
And the thing is, there is such a thing as legitimate criticism of Islam. Of course there is. Like every other religion ever invented by humans, Islam is fair game. Its arguments can be countered, its claims can be refuted, and cultures it has influenced can be rebuked for their excesses and abuses.
You claim to be an atheist, right? So we can start on that common ground there, all right? That Islam is false, all right? So if we can agree on that, then we can agree that the actions carried out by Muslims in the name of Islam are predicated on a foundation of lies.
The insidious thing about Islamophobia is that many of those who practice it will insist that they are actually engaging in legitimate criticism of Islam.
I don't see why the two things are mutually exclusive.
And sometimes that pretense can be very convincing. Islamophobia isn't always practiced by angry, blatant, foaming-at-the-mouth bigots. Those are easy to spot. But in addition to them, it's practiced by people who ought to know better.
And now remember that the next time you pimp a show called No Old White Guys or whatever exclusionary club you think would be great for equality.
Including, I'm sad to say, some of the most prominent public figures of the atheist movement.
Such as Fox News anchor Megyn Kelly. Are you sure you have your slides in the right order?
My fellow atheists can be some of the most stubborn of all Islamophobes because they don't see double standards and vilification. They see an extension of their quite rational rejection of religion in general.
I see. This is going to be one of those atheism, anti-theism things, right? You're an atheist and you don't believe in God, but you think that religion is okay, whereas I'm an anti-theist. I don't believe in God, and I think that the religious deserve to be ridiculed. I mean, nobody chooses the color of their skin unless you're like Donald Trump or something, but people do choose to be retarded.
Never mind that here in the US at least, Christianity as a whole is not implicated when someone cites their Christian beliefs as justification for some horrible act of violence or murder.
Don't look at me. Of course I draw that conclusion.
There are not calls to alter security measures to protect us from Christian terrorists.
And I don't believe that security measures should be heightened because of Islamic terrorists either. I support Apple's fight against the FBI because after 9/11, America traded privacy for security, and they did it willingly. And I oppose this to this day. So go ahead, Shives. Call me an Islamophobe. Paint me with that broad brush of yours.
In fact, we hardly ever refer to such people as terrorists.
Who's this we?
It's understood, even by those of us who hold it to be false, that Christianity is a religion of great ideological and theological diversity, and it would be unfair to judge the whole by its angriest and most regressive members.
Why, that sounds a lot like what you're doing here.
Yet all too often we fail to treat Islam and Muslims the same way.
Again,
This sort of thinking is not only biased and inimical, worse yet, it serves the aims of extremists. Gangs of Islamist terrorists like Daesh, the so-called Islamic State, want Muslims to be singled out and alienated in secular societies. They want Islam in general to be defined according to their literal fundamentalist interpretation of the Quran and their barbaric, violently oppressive attitudes toward women, LGBTQ folk, and non-Muslims.
because Islam really is a religion of peace, right?
They want to erase moderates by convincing us that moderate Muslims are just Muslims who lack commitment.
Yeah, that's kind of like the difference between feminists and intersectional feminists, isn't it?
That the only truly authentic Muslims are the zealous and brutal jihadists.
Hey, they're just taking a page out of the old Atheism Plus playbook. And we all know how well that worked out for you guys.
There are way too many people who despise groups like Daesh, but who propel their narrative anyway, because they don't seem to realize that bigotry stated in an intellectual voice is still bigotry, and unacknowledged biases are biases all the same.
Shives, listen to me. You are, without a doubt, guilty of all of the same goddamn bullshit that you're speaking out against here in this video. But I guess because you're excluding old white guys, that makes it okay, right? Alright guys, once again, I don't have a cold closing for this presentation, so I'm just going to pimp my next live show, which is going to happen tonight. Be there at midnight to watch the fun. I'll see you there.